everybody. Once again, this is the Marty O'Donnell Show. I'm Marty O'Donnell. This week is going to be another, instead of talking about culture and video games with some of my old-time friends, this is going to be a week where I talk to somebody I met a year ago. His name is Terry Schilling. He's president of the American Principles Project, and it's a great organization. It's a political action committee. They have offices all over the country and also Washington, D.C., and because I'm running for Congress here in District 3 in the state of Nevada and the city of Las Vegas, I need to be able to touch base with some of the political folks. He's a really interesting guy. He's got 7 kids. He's only 38, so he started young. So we had a really great conversation about family and family values and morality and government and some of the current things that are happening, like as of today, that are happening politically. So here we go. This is president of the American Principles Project. My guest today, Terry Schilling. All right, here we are. This is the Marty O'Donnell Show, and I've already given an introduction to my guest today, Terry Schilling. Terry, welcome to the program, the Marty O'Donnell Show. Here we go.
Thanks so much for having me, Marty. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here. My show sort of vacillates between talking to some of my old pals who made Halo and Destiny with me over the years and game design and stuff like that. And then we'll do some political stuff and some religious stuff. And so I like to mix politics, religion, and culture all together in one big pot. So no one knows what to expect next.
Love it. Look, I will just tell you, I enjoyed meeting you last year when you were running for Congress out in,
I remember.
Near Vegas, but I do appreciate that you're from the video game world. I grew up on video games. I played basically every single game under the sun. I still play, though. I play with my kids now. We play, Call of Duty. We're more of a PlayStation family, to be honest.
That's okay.
I don't want to
There's
tell
nothing
you,
wrong.
but
I love the PlayStation.
but we've been playing Helldivers 2, which is a really fun game to play together.
Sure.
But we love Call of Duty Zombies is absolutely fun. So it's good to talk with someone else that understands that video games aren't necessarily terrible. They're great.
Well, it's funny. I talk to different people, usually people my age, who are like, video games, I don't know, and they're so stuffy about it. And it's nice to finally get to see people who are in their 30s and 40s. I think you're still probably in your 30s, right?
Yeah, 38.
Okay, 38. Oh, it's great. You're just barely in your 30s. Okay. But it's nice to see these generations coming along who are not so, you might be a stuffed shirt about other things, but video games are okay, which I love. So that's good. And frankly, I think that video games have a lot to offer that people who haven't really looked at them deeply are probably not really aware of.
No, there's stories in all of these, right? And some of them aren't good stories, but there are ways for your kids to learn. But also, it's a community type thing, right?
Yeah.
And if I think I'd be open to criticism if it was me all by myself in my basement playing alone. But I'm getting my boys together. It's a father-son's activity, and it gets so competitive. And there's a lot of tears, some punches that get thrown every now and then. Max feels like we're ganging up on him, but it's all good. It's very fun. Everything is healthy if you do it the right way. You can be unhealthy about really anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that I've always talked to some of my contemporaries who are somehow look askance at the video games. And I'm like, are your kids spending this is years ago, 25 years ago, I would say, are your kids spending a lot of time playing video games? And they're like, yeah, they really are. Do you trust your kids? Do you like your kids? Yeah, my kids are great. Then why do you think they're spending time at this? There's probably something there that's compelling, whether it's the story or the characters. And they go, oh, really? There's story and characters? I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of you, Terry. You're a cool dad, not a fuddy-duddy dad. So, yeah, it's fun to go back and talk to some of the guys who work with me on some of these games, just to fill in the blanks. And when we were doing it, our heads were down. We were just working our butts off, and we shipped, and then we went on to other things or went on to other companies or whatever. And like a guy that I talked to recently was talking about how the stuff he worked on, which is like this, he worked really deeply on the cinematics for Halo Reach, which was a very cinematic story game. A lot of good actors and a lot of stuff in it. He says, yeah, he hasn't looked at those cinematics in 15 years. And he just happened to see someone streaming the game, and he was like, yeah, I forgot about all that, what we did. You know, he just went on to the next thing. So it's fun to know that there's a life beyond us out there for people playing. And you're
No,
doing what we call couch co-op, which is great.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Look, I will say that there are these games that are just absolutely beautiful, and I think you're part of that with the art that you produce. It really hit me. I was playing Red Dead Redemption 2,
Oh,
the
yeah,
latest, and that
absolutely.
is just an absolutely stunning and beautiful game. The scenery, the just knowing how much time and how many people it takes to produce these games today. It's incredible. I mean, we love Michelangelo and we love Da Vinci and we love all these great artists, but like these take hundreds and sometimes thousands of artists all working together in time. And
Yeah,
one thing I wanted to ask you though, Marty, was like,
sure.
how did you get inspired? Because it is beautiful music. It is timely music in Halo. How did like what would you do to get inspired? Would it just kind of come to you? Would you have to watch the scenes that you were composing for? Like that, because this is something that I don't think a lot of people think about or talk about.
Well, for me, it was I'd been doing video games for a few years, and I had done before I got into video games. I did commercial work and film work, so deadlines were always very important to me. So, in order for me to truly be inspired, I need to know when is this? When do we need this? But you know, when the people I worked with, it was always very collaborative, and you know, the storytellers. I would just say, what are the emotions that we're trying to evoke? And as sort of a composer craftsman, I had gotten to the point where when I know what kind of emotions need to be evoked, I I know what I need to do. So it wasn't so much I needed, really, bolts of information out of the blue, or inspiration. If I knew what the sort of emotions that I needed to do. So, for example, in Halo, I had three words: ancient, epic, mysterious. Those are great words for somebody like me. Um, and it was pretty last minute. So the ancient one was, well, Gregorian chant monks. That sounds
Yep.
ancient. And so I just went with that right away. And it worked out pretty good. But,
Yeah.
also, I enjoy composing music. And when I'm sort of improvising with music, if it evokes a feeling in me while I'm doing it, then I know it will probably evoke feelings in others. So yeah, I'm a little bit loose. I might not be as disciplined as some other composers, but it's fun.
No, but it's so cool because like you literally have a connection with millions of people that play these games,
Yeah,
and not a lot of people have that. And it's and I will say like the Halo album, like the music that you put together, it is iconic, right? It's up there, like you would
I know.
recognize it, you would know it's Halo just as much as you would know it's the Braveheart
Yeah,
soundtrack
yeah.
or any other.
You're not thinking. I was never thinking of that at the moment or at the time we were doing it. It's sort of nice that I wasn't thinking about it. Am I going to do something that's iconic in 15 years? I was just like, this is due on Monday and it's Friday. That's usually the way that went. So I never was thinking, super long term. So, 25 years later to see that this stuff really actually has meaning to people is really satisfying. And, to a certain extent, I think creative people sometimes wonder themselves where their ideas came from, or, I mean, and of course, because I believe that there is a connection to the creator and we're created in his image. Not that I'm not blaming God for any of this music, but I just feel like anything that's worthwhile has a worthwhile source. So I believe there's some connection there to who we are as people and who God made us to be. So
I know. I think that's prescient. I think that's exactly right. I think that's why true art stands out as beautiful because it's good and it came from a much higher being that's known as the creator. So I, I,
well,
I agree with you on that.
And just to finish this off, because that's not why you're on the show today, but I
There's
appreciate
something else in the news to talk about.
it. The number of people it takes to make a game, or a series of games we made over 10 years with the Halo series. There was 5 games, 10 years. It was just a huge undertaking. And there were thousands of people involved by the end, who came through on that. And I have this advantage of musicians tend to have this advantage. I was thinking about this for films the other day. I was thinking about Jaws and 2001 and, Star Wars and, so many movies. Like if you take away the music, it's like, is the movie still the memorable movie? And, so many hundreds of people it takes to make a movie, but the guy who composed the music really can have an impact. And it's just sort of a gift for those of us who compose music. We can have an amazing amount of impact as just one creative person, or just one. The music itself can stand alone and evoke so many emotions. And the artists, animators and artists and designers and programmers, there's so many of them, and they to a certain extent they have equal impact. It's just the public doesn't know that. It's so I feel a little guilty about it, but not too guilty.
Yeah. You're sharing beauty with the world and impacting millions. I feel pretty darn good about it.
Well, thanks. So Terry, we met a year ago, and I really enjoyed that. We got lunch together. We talked. We seemed like we shared a lot of interests, especially. I remember talking about like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and storytelling. How tell me about the American Principles Project. Like, how did that happen? What does it mean? What do you guys do?
Well, it's very simple, Marty. We're like the NRA, but we don't do guns. We do families. We do parental rights and the innocence of children, and that's the easiest way to describe. In this town, we call ourselves Big Family, or at least the press calls us Big Family.
Oh, interesting.
There's Big Pharma, Big Oil, Big Tobacco. We're Big Family. So if you're coming after our daughters and you're putting men in their locker rooms or their showers, we're coming for you.
Yeah.
If you're taking away parental rights when it comes to education or any other aspect, we're coming for you, right? We want to serve as a cavalry for those that are on the front lines defending our children and parental rights, and we want to serve as a major punishment for anyone that's trying to hurt those things.
Yeah, and as of today, there's a couple stories that are current today, but by the time we air this particular podcast, it might be a week, and things could change so quickly. I was thinking about it, meeting with you a year ago. Wow, what a difference a year makes, right? With politics. Like when I think about what happened from May till now of last year, it's just insane, the changes that we've seen. So what I want to say is that currently there's the Simone Biles going out there trashing, oh gosh.
Riley Gaines.
Yeah, Riley Gaines, of course. And Riley, I mean, I don't know how anybody can call Riley a bully or any of the things that Simone is saying. I don't understand. This isn't a 90-10 issue. Like nobody says, especially parents, nobody who has a daughter, and I have 2 daughters, and you have sons, right? Is that what you said?
I've got 3 daughters and 4 sons.
Oh, whoa. Okay, so
we've
you put your money where your mouth is. I like that.
No, look, I will just say it's the most rewarding and impactful thing I've ever done with my life. And
Sure.
I think every father probably feels the same way. I've just been luckier, I think, than others. God's really blessed us, and we've taken every one of those blessings with open arms. It's even when it's tough, we still praise the Lord for all the joy and blessings He's given us.
Well, 7 kids. How old were you when you started on the kids?
19. I got a head start in high school. Yeah, that's right.
Wow. Well, tremendous. I'm assuming same wife the whole time.
No. High school was a little bit different, but I'll tell you. My eldest daughter, her name is Grace, and she's one of the smartest kids ever. She plays the euphonium, which is a mini tuba. Yeah, your listeners and viewers might not know that, but she's super talented. Beautiful. My best student.
Oh wow!
But and besides that, I have two other girls. One's just turned 14, and the other one's 3, and then 4 boys. Just all boom, boom,
Okay.
boom, boom, boom.
Wow.
And then we got
Okay.
a
Well,
baby boy too.
yeah. What I was going to say is like if you have daughters, you don't want boys competing against daughters. But I think if I had sons, I have 3 grandsons now. So I had 2 daughters, and now I have 3 grandsons. So I'm getting the mix. But I would never want to encourage my sons to compete against girls. I mean, you grow up and that's the one thing you cannot do. You do not hit girls. Boom. Like, come on. Like, boys don't hit girls. When I saw the Olympics last year and I saw this guy who was, I mean, I'm sorry. I don't know why there was even a controversy. It's like, this is a guy with guy muscles beating up women. And it just seemed atrocious to me. And they kept, I was like being accused of being this horrible transphobe. Or I wasn't even trans because they were saying, no, this is a woman. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Who's done the testing on this? And now it comes out, of course, that it was a guy. To surprise to anybody? Like, I mean,
No,
I don't know.
I don't think it was a surprise really to anyone. Marty, I've been working against these people, this industry really for so long, and it's just the worst industry ever, right? They are pushing a lie, a huge lie.
It's a huge
big
lie.
some would say, that men can become women and women can become men. And then from there, if you disagree with any bit of that, you're transphobic, you're a bigot, you're tantamount to, racists in the 1960s. It's just absolutely preposterous. But what they don't want people to know is that this is a $4.5 billion industry.
Yeah.
And they're making money by sterilizing children, sterilizing adults, giving girls as young as 15 years old a double mastectomy if they say that they're a boy. And by the way, most of these girls and boys end up regretting it. There's a growing group all over the country, all over the world, really, and they're known as detransitioners.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Everyone's hearing about them now.
Yep.
And the interesting thing I'll tell you, Marty, is that where they don't. And I'm a capitalist. I like free markets. But in the nations in Europe where they don't have a for-profit healthcare system, this transgender issue is going away very quickly.
Right.
They're relying very heavily on the evidence and on the science there. We need to get up to speed here, and we can't allow a $4.5 billion industry to put men in our daughters' sports, to put men in our daughters' locker rooms and showers, and we definitely can't allow them to sterilize the next generation of America.
Yeah, and it's funny because we talk about boys can't become girls, boys shouldn't be competing against girls in sports. Like, the reverse is never discussed, girls competing in men's sports, because it doesn't work. You can't do that. Like, if you found a woman swimmer, for example, who said, I want to transition to be a man, they wouldn't be able to compete in men's swimming. It just doesn't happen. So the fact that it's happening this other way, and it's to have Gavin Newsom say, well, it's an issue of fairness. It's like, well, yeah, it's an issue of fairness. So why aren't you doing the fair thing? Like, I can't believe, like, right now today, there's a male track and field star in California who's competing against women. And it's fair to have, 2 people sharing the podium. And I don't know. This is what surprises me about Simone Biles, is that she's chosen a hill like this to die on, and I don't know where she's going to get support. I just don't see any people coming around her. It just seems like a brain dead issue.
Marty, people hate hypocrites, right?
Yeah.
Simone Biles is obviously famous because she's the most athletic female gymnast of all time. I mean, that's really saying a lot. She's incredibly talented,
right?
But she's using that power and that influence that she's garnered to hurt people. Right. And she knows that these girls go through a lot to train. She's gone through it herself.
Right.
She needs to imagine, if a guy had claimed to be a man or a woman and then competed against her. And I will just say this. The spat against Riley Gaines is so preposterous that I've worked with hundreds of people in politics. And Riley Gaines, I've been working with her for around 4 or 5 years. She is fantastic. I have zero criticism of her. She's the sweetest, most courageous woman I've ever met, besides maybe my wife, but she's fantastic. I mean, and she's incredibly smart. oh my gosh, she's absolutely incredibly intelligent, and I love her. So it was just the wrong fight to pick. It was the wrong person to go to war with. Riley's on the right side, and if you disagree with Riley, you should really be questioning what your position is.
Well, I've been in the game industry, and I know and have worked with transsexual people, women, some that I've only known as women, and they're adults. Whatever they did deep into their adult age. And I've gotten along with them. I've worked with them. They're wonderful people. They're spectacular. None of the people that I've known in this that are transsexual have ever pushed a political agenda. They never talked about it as something that they felt like they had to proselytize or convince other people, or you weren't even aware. Like, it was only after I really got to know them and had some deeper conversations with them that I was even aware that this is something they'd gone through. It was a very personal decision. I Regardless of how I might feel about it myself, I can respect that they did it, and they're, you know, deserving, of course, of respect and love, just like every human being. But there's something different about this sort of violent political movement that's happening, especially with young people. And I got to be honest, the one that kills me the most about this, because at the beginning, when I first learned about these things, they would tell me about the trauma that they had, and the dysphoria, and the lifelong psychological burdens that they had. And then they finally, at a certain point in their adult life, middle-aged actually, they decided to go through years worth of actual transitioning and surgeries and this horrific amount of stuff that they went through, that I still feel horrible that they went through all that. But on part of my brain was like, well, okay, at least you're committed to the cause. Like, to make a commitment like that at least shows, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like,
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
have the operations and you're an adult and you know everything that's going to go on, maybe some of it takes you by surprise. Maybe some of it's more traumatic than you were expecting. I don't know. But at least you made the commitment. These people who are just like, yeah, today I feel like I'm a woman, and tomorrow I might not. It's like, I feel like, wait, that's a whole different category. Like, we're just supposed to, this gender fluid thing. I remember how do you respond to this concept that gender fluidity is actually a scientific thing? Like, how do you respond to that? Because I don't
It's
think
not.
it is.
You just reject it. It's entirely silly. Males are males, females are females. You either produce a certain type of gametes, or you don't.
Right.
And you're either a majority male or a majority female. It's not complicated. The idea that your brain is telling you one day that you're a female and the other day that you're a male, well, that's I'm going to say something that's offensive, or at least viewed as offensive, but it's really out of love and compassion. That's called a mental illness. And it's okay. The good news is it's okay to have a mental illness, just as if it's okay to have any other sickness. It just means you need help, and you need the right type of help, right? And I think that's what, because I'm a Christian, right? Like, and you get accused of these stupid words, but the reality is, like, I think everyone can get to heaven. And I mean that. I really think everyone can get to heaven. I hope everyone gets to heaven, but we can't allow people to hurt themselves. Like, I have a duty, since I know I've seen the travesty that this stuff causes in people's lives, especially once they wake up and realize that they were manipulated and taken advantage of and even rushed. They tell these people that they need to start affirming their own gender identity, because if they don't, then they'll end up committing suicide. It's like this disgusting emotional blackmail. And if you know anyone that's ever been lost to suicide, you know how offensive it is to use these things as political weapons. But it's terrible. We need to get these people the help they deserve and require, just like we did all throughout the rest of human history. Gender dysphoria is not new. We just help people accept their bodies. We didn't go along with a silliness of a male and telling him that he has a female penis. Actually, there is no male or female. It's just silly, and we just need to reject it outright.
Well, that's good, because I feel like this the idea of dysphoria and whoever they've changed it from a mental illness to a whatever they're calling it now. But I mean, it's dysphoria is body image dysphoria is what anorexia is. Everyone knows anorexia will lead to death because the person will actually starve themselves or so malnutritious nutrition that they'll die. But I can't imagine using this horrible excuse that someone is like, well, they're suicidal. So if your 13-year-old daughter says, I'm going to commit suicide if you don't let me take diet pills because, they're anorexic and you can see this, but if they say, I'll commit suicide if you don't let me take diet pills, what kind of parent would you be if you said, okay, here's some diet pills? Like,
right, or
as soon
any
as someone
other thing.
says, I'm going to commit suicide, it's like, okay, that in and of itself is a sign of a mental illness.
And we got to go right to the emergency room, right?
Exactly.
And I learned that lesson. Well, I almost learned that lesson the hard way. I remember, I was not a very good kid, a very good teenager. And I remember flippantly saying that to my parents as a teenager.
Oh.
And my dad looked at me and he said, if you ever say that again, we are going immediately to the emergency room because we're not going to take a chance at losing you. And that really let me know that, that's not a game. That's not some type of, empty threat to throw around. It's so serious. And you really learn how serious that is once you lose someone that you love to suicide. And
yeah, and you brought up another really good point, which is that kids going through adolescence, and I know this from experience. I won't tell all my details here, but I know from experience, just like you said, adolescence is a very tumultuous time. Kids experiment with saying things like, I'm going to commit suicide, or, I feel like hurting myself, or they do. That's a period of time that these things, grand dramatic gestures are being done by teenagers. And it's certainly not that it's not a time that you want them to be making life-changing decisions, because it's such a volatile time. And society and parents need to be encouraged to protect kids as they're going through that, 4 or 5 year period of tumult when their brain is changing and horrible thoughts are streaming through their brains. It's not an easy time. And to somehow think that we should give them enough rope to literally hang themselves is just insane to me. I don't understand how we got to this point.
No, it's terrible. And you're right, Marty. Everyone knows that adolescence and your teenage years, all of that, it's super tough. You're super uncomfortable. What teenager that's going through puberty is comfortable in their own body? I'd love to meet them.
None.
Right? It's all uncomfortable, and your friends are all maturing at different levels and different stages. You feel insecure at certain points, and you feel overconfident. We just need to let kids be kids, right? And they talk about these things called puberty blockers, which delay puberty until you're ready to make the. First of all, you never get that time back. Right. I'd rather go through puberty at 11 or 12 or 13 or 14 than at 19, at 20. I mean, that's what some of these kids, end up going through is puberty at like 18, 19 years old. And the thing that kills me about this, Marty, a lot of people don't realize this, is when you go through puberty as a kid, that's when your brain starts really maturing. That's when you start really developing the ability to think critically. And it's like, when you stop thinking about cartoons and you start thinking about real life consequences, right? And that is something that really gets missed in the whole transgender argument. When we're putting these kids on puberty blockers, you're actually delaying their ability for their brain to mature and to be able to develop and think critically and really get to the basis of these problems.
And like you said, especially I think in England was one of the first that the institutes in England that realized that they had made a really drastic mistake by allowing this to continue and be, encouraged. And they've since changed the whole thing. How is it that European countries that are usually so much further advanced in these sort of liberal areas have realized this mistake and made a reversal on it, and we still are struggling? Is it simply a capitalist problem, do you think, or?
No, I think it's both ideology and capitalism.
Okay.
So I think the $4.5 billion, that's their total revenue throughout the year. They
Wow.
take a big chunk of that and they invest in a public relations campaign. So
Yeah.
that's why you see a lot about it in the news and hear about it, even though it's less than 1% of the population, takes up probably about 10% of the media,
Yeah.
all the LGBT stuff. But on top of that, they use that additional funds, those additional funds for government lobbying. So
Oh,
they've actually changed the law in a lot of blue states and they've banned the ability for children to sit down with a doctor and be talked to about how to feel comfortable in their own bodies. They call it gender identity conversion therapy. And they ban gender identity conversion therapy. And I'm going to blow your mind, but they allow you to get a permanent and harmful and sterilizing sex change procedure. Right? I think we're going to ban something. You should just ban both, maybe.
yeah.
But at a minimum, you should ban sex changes for kids. If you can't consent to sex, you shouldn't be able to consent to a sex change. That's the logic I've been using.
Yeah.
But I do think it's ideological. And if you look at the roots of the whole transgender industry, it all stems from a woman named Judith Butler, who was out
Okay.
of Berkeley.
Yeah.
And she came up this ideological construct of transgenderism. And what she said was, so she's a radical feminist. And her idea was, what we're going to do is we're going to use gender to destroy gender. So
Right.
what they're doing by putting men and women's sports in private spaces and giving sex changes to kids is they're trying to eliminate all distinctions on the basis of sex for women. We have a lot of protections for women under our law. They want to eliminate all that.
Yeah.
That's actually their goal, is to eliminate women's private spaces, women's private, educational opportunities. All of that they want gone because they want men and women treated exactly the same, even though we're totally different.
Right. And it's so funny to me that there could be any sort of roots of this particular thing in feminism, because feminism you would think would be entirely the opposite of this. It's like, to me, it's like, oh, here we go again. Men win. Like, we win in sports, we win in their spaces. Title IX is gone because we just invaded everything. And it's like, how is this not a indication of the patriarchy that they love to talk about so much?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely crazy. I think things in feminism got a little wild with second wave feminism.
Yes, yes.
The first wave, they did great work. They secured the right to vote and they
Right.
got a bunch of rights for women to go into public and have rights in employment, all that. But then these second wave feminists, they were just about like destroying womanhood. They were
Yeah.
about destroying motherhood.
Right.
The enemy of the second wave feminists were the family, husbands, mothers, wives. That's what they wanted to eliminate. These people are so sick that they look at the family as like a plantation. And that's not me saying inflammatory stuff. That's Betty Friedan,
Yes,
one of the
I
second
know.
wave feminists who wrote
Yep.
about how the family is really just a new plantation. It's the
Right.
new
New
slavery.
slave. Right.
And it's atrocious. It's so inverted. It just does nothing but cause pain and suffering to people. Motherhood is amazing. Fatherhood is
Yes.
amazing. Being a child in a loving home, that is amazing. It's a blessing that you could only come up with, only think of in the most prosperous and blessed nation in the world.
Well, I mean, when I was growing up, we talked about, the tragedy of broken families. And what that means is that a family is, in its ideal state, is the nuclear family, and it can be broken. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be healed, or that doesn't mean there aren't ways of treating the brokenness. But we have to at least acknowledge that if it's not mother, father, child, there's something that broke in there. If a child doesn't have a father, if a child doesn't have a mother, something broke, right? I mean, it's not the end of the world. These things can be healed, but as a society, we have to figure out a way to come around that and still uphold the ideal of nuclear family. And there is like sort of second and third best based on what is the ideal. And we could talk about being a God-given thing, which is, as Christians, I know we believe that, but I think there's a practical way to look at it too. You just look at the stats, and it's just like people, especially the boys who were raised in a broken home, are more likely to be criminals. It's just
Right.
the stats don't lie. My daughter works in this field. She has a organization called Foster Kinship, and she's trying to fill in the gaps that a lot of times the foster system and the government system leaves, they don't touch, which is when a great aunt or a grandmother comes forward, or the grandparents or the aunts and uncles come forward to say, we'll take the kids that would instead be going to a foster home. So they're kinship foster parents. But as soon as these people come forward and say, we want to take the 3 kids into our home, and they're because they're our nephews or nieces or grandchildren, the government agencies, for the most part, go, great, no longer our problem. The case is closed. Whereas if it was a traditional foster home, they might get government assistance. So my daughter is sort of helping to fill in that gap. Her slogan is help keep home in the family. So it's,
Yes.
if you can bring the family along, or sometimes even what they call fictive care, which is close friends of the family that are willing to take the kids. But what happens is all of a sudden they run into problems like, how do we enroll the kids in school or get medical care? Suddenly their house isn't big enough because they've downsized when their kids left home, and now they have the grandchildren coming in. They need help, and she's doing this thing, and it's all very data driven in terms of why it's needed and how you can remedy these things. Of course, she has a gigantic big heart. She cares about all this. She's served over 10,000 kids in the Nevada state of Nevada alone. So it's really, really amazing. I've been watching this happen, but sorry, I didn't mean to go on this, but like the thing is that when I hear these sort of sneaky liberal, like when Hillary Clinton first said, it takes a village to raise a child, I was like, I understand what you're saying. I understand the African village that this saying came from. There's no way that African village would have ever minimized the importance of family. So I really distrust why she was pushing that. But I am saying that it doesn't take a village to raise a child. It takes a family, and it takes families to make a village.
That's right.
That's the order of construction that I think is ordained. That's the way I put it.
Look, and it's just silly to create this unnecessary divide.
Yes.
Right. And that's what Hillary Clinton was doing by saying it takes a village. Was she was trying to say, parents, they're not necessary. We should really be raising these. It's that mantra that you hear on MSNBC that children don't belong to their parents. They belong to all of us. Oh, really? Well, then you can pay their bills. You can wipe their butts and change their diapers. You can feed them in the middle of the night. Look, it's obvious. Parents are better at raising children than other people. That's it. There's no other replacement for a father. There's no other replacement for a mother. You can make do. You can do good enough, but you're doing it with a limp. You're doing it in a cast.
Right.
Doing it with injury.
Yeah.
And all the more credit to the moms and dads that have to do it with less help because I don't know how they do it. I couldn't do it by myself.
The way my daughter puts it is that we are supporting the traditional family, of course, but these are cases where we want to support those who step up to fulfill the roles that would normally be taken by the mother and father. So it is like you still want to encourage those people who are willing to make the sacrifice and step up into the role of mother and father. But it is still a very tough scene, and statistically it is absolutely not the ideal. So it's hard.
No, look, all of the studies show that the kids that do best are the kids raised by their married biological mother and father and go to church on Sunday.
Yeah,
the kids that always do worst in terms of economic achievement, crime, suicidality, drug use, all of the things, those are the kids raised in unmarried households that don't go to church ever. The two other groups, the married that don't go to church and then the unmarried that do go to church, those kind of fluctuate between each other, but it's not even close. The kids that always do best, they get better education, they commit less crime, do less drugs, they get married, they're happier. They're always the kids that are married in a stable home that go to church on Sunday. It's an easy formula. It's an obvious formula, but it's not always easy to follow in all these crazy times that we're living in.
Well, so that leads me to you were like, what's the origin of these things? And Hillary Clinton is not the origin, but she's close. There is a book out, and I should have done better prep. I wasn't thinking about talking about this book. It, is it the tyranny of the self or the? It has to do with sort of the history of how we got to the idea that um, just the self is the most important thing, like our self-actualization. And the guy, you might have read this, it came out a couple of years ago, but the very first line of his book, I think, is something like, I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, is a statement that no one would have understood just like 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And, he said, my father would not understand what you're saying. People, 100, 200, 300 years ago, that would have been a totally nonsense saying. But because of, maybe starting with whether it's, the romantic poets who felt like the self-actualization is the most important thing, finding oneself, identifying who you are as as a person, your true identity. All these things became an idol and became the most important thing. And so what's weird is that our like sexual identity or sexual preference has become our entire 100% identity, and it's somehow we're being constrained and we're prevented from finding our true selves if we can't just do whatever it is that it's a philosophical and extremely selfish way to believe about yourself. Like it's unbelievably self-centered. Of course, it's in the word itself. You're self-centered. So where are you on like the history of this? Is it Marxism? Is it pre-Marxism? Is it cultural Marxism now? Like, what is this?
No, I do think that a lot of this is rooted in Marxism. I think that the identitarianism that we're
Yep.
going through, I think that there were a bunch of really bad philosophers that entered the scenes in the 19th century.
Yeah.
That was really like the explosion of all this stuff.
Nietzsche, not good. Got it.
No, terrible. Self-accusation, it's really bad.
Yeah.
And you see this, it's essentially the original sin, right?
Right. It is.
We're worshiping ourselves. That's at the end of the day is what's happening is we're trying to become our own gods. God
Yep.
gave you, a biological sex. Well, I'm going to reject that. Well, good luck.
Yeah.
There's certain things that are baked into the cake that you really can't change and you're going to have a bad time messing with. And, I will say that these identities are just absolutely crazy. And if I have to hear the term self-love one more time, I'm going to go crazy. What about self-improvement?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you're self-love, like, you mean self-esteem? You mean
Yeah.
not thinking that you're a total piece of trash? We all have to improve. Like, I'm not perfect. And if you think you're perfect, well, I can point out some flaws, like we can all do that to each other. And we should be more candid with each other. We should stop lying. I mean, the self-worship has gotten so bad that it's now like a cancelable offense. It's less so now, but it's a cancelable offense if you tell someone the truth. You're not actually a woman. You're not actually a man. Like, that's apparently supposed to be offensive.
Right.
When you're just telling them the truth. Get better. And then what I love is, doctors have now embraced this whole starting to embrace this whole health at all sizes, as if being extremely obese is not going to shorten your lifespan.
Right.
Obviously it is. You got to get healthy. We could go on and on, but this identity stuff, it's all just self-worship and it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the original sin. I think this is not any different than it's been since the beginning of mankind. That sin is the sin that man always falls back to, which is we don't need God, we know better than God, and they love themselves. There's also another book that Andrew Klavan just wrote. It's called The Kingdom of Cain. Have you, by any chance, picked that one up yet?
Oh, I need to.
I'm recommending it to everybody. It's really good. Andrew, if you're watching, that's a plug. But he starts with this thing he calls the Great Speculation, which is really sort of another way of phrasing, the great commandments of Jesus. Love your neighbor as yourself. And love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. But he just says the first speculation, which is something you just have to postulate, right? It's not something you prove, but if you're going to have a morality of any sort of morality, it starts with that others are as important as you are to yourself, and all are equally dear to God.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, I like the way he put that's just a very succinct thing. Like, as soon as you think, well, my needs are more important and other people don't really count like I count to myself, but like that's that self love. And then others are, they don't have the right to have that. Like only I count, which means you can do anything you want to other people because it's for your own self gratification. But once you realize that we're all equally as important to ourselves as we are, but we're all equally dear to God. Number one, God is in the mix. God is there. Without God, I don't see how you really have morality that has any basis for existing logically. You have to start with that.
No, there's got to be, there's a creator of everything, and there has to be some higher authority. And if there's no higher authority above humanity in general, then it really is just whoever's the strongest man, whoever builds the biggest army. That's who is in charge of our morality, regardless of what you argue. If there is no God, there is no creator, well, then there's no higher authority. But there's got to be some higher authority because we all know that rape is always wrong. We all know that cold-blooded murder is always wrong. We know that stealing is always wrong. Why is that? There has to be some divine creator that planned this and designed it all. And if not, then we're all just we might as well just start getting the hedonistic lifestyles going because if nothing else matters.
Well, I mean, he makes such a great case for this idea of the kingdom of Cain. Cain being the very first murderer in humankind, and because Andrew Klavan is also a mystery murder writer, this is what he's made his living at. He's looking at like, what does it mean to have that as one of the things that happens in mankind? We have murders. Like, why is that so obviously against God? Like, we all accept that. We can have the living room conversations with people who are being very erudite and talking about morality and how it's it causes people to not really fulfill their dreams or whatever. But if somebody just comes in and murders somebody, immediately everybody goes like, well, that's wrong. Like, everybody knows what's right and wrong as soon as as soon as something like that happens. Like, there's no fine tuning those things anymore. There's no discussion about it. It's like, what's right and wrong when you see it. And it's like murder, rape, child, hurting children. I mean, it's so obvious and everybody knows it. We all act that way, but we'll have a whole philosophical discussion as though good and evil don't exist and right and wrong don't exist. And it's mind-boggling to me.
Well, and there's this weird obsession right now, and I experienced it with the trans fight, where the science comes in and they say, well, there's this study over here that says this, and there's this study over here. It's like, yeah, guys, I could make up studies too. Like there's this over-reliance on studies that are paid for by these industries, when in reality, like, you could produce 100 million studies saying that children should be able to get sex change procedures, and I'm never going to support it because I know it's wrong. There's some things that are, well, what our founding fathers say. They said that some things are self-evident, right? And among them are the fact that we are created, endowed by our creator with inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I don't have to back that up with a study. I don't have to tell you anything. God created us. We know it. That's our assertion. And if you disagree with us and you want to change it, well, go ahead and try, but you're going to have to kill us before we'll ever admit that boys and girls should be able to get sex change procedures or that men should be in girls' sports. It's that important.
Well, so in terms of politics in the United States, and I'm sure you've had to like deal with this your whole career, the old saw about the separation of church and state, which is in the Constitution, it seems like well, let me just give me your whole spiel on that, because I feel like it's an old saw that has like been debunked by those of us who know it can be debunked, but it's still used constantly. As soon as you try to say, look, there's good and bad and there's evil and good, and we should have laws that reflect that basic sense of morality, you'll get some moron who says, yeah, but separation of church and state. So how do you respond to that? Because they're going to
Well,
come at you with that.
well, the typical saying is either separation church and state or you can't legislate morality.
You can't
Well,
legislate
well,
morality.
well, what's
Exactly.
a law? What is a
Right.
law besides civic morality? That
Right.
that is what a law is. It's civic morality. It's the bare minimum, right? So it's what
Sure.
will throw you in jail over if you do it. So it's a little bit, harsher. But the reality is that separation of church and state is not. It's been interpreted to where it's not what it was originally intended. There is no separation of church and state. What the Constitution says very clearly is that Congress shall make no law abridging your right to freely practice religion anywhere.
Right.
And that's all of our laws that are doing today, is abridging our right to freely practice religion.
Hmm.
At the founding, every state had its own religion,
Sure.
right?
There were
So the idea that
Catholic
there's
and
separation,
Protestant. Yeah.
right?
Quaker, whatever. Yeah.
And it's what I will say is you're exactly right, Marty, when you point out the fact that law has to separate good from evil, right? If our laws treat evil equally with good, well, evil's going to dominate because
Yes.
evil crowds out. Evil strikes first. Good does not.
Hmm.
Good waits until it's, struck, and then it responds. But that is exactly right. We can't pretend like good and evil should be treated equally in this country. We have to punish evil. That is the
Hmm.
point of laws. That's why it exists. And if you look at our schools, we got Bibles out, we got prayer out, and what's come in? The pronoun police.
Yeah.
When you ask God to leave, you don't get freedom or prosperity, you get pronoun police.
Right.
And it's obvious that this was a big mistake. But I don't think anyone should be compelled to practice a religion. But I don't know how you separate what you believe is right and wrong from your religion. I just don't. I think maybe you just have a different religion. You might not consider it one, but it is a religion of some sort.
It is. Yeah. It's, I forget, nature abhors a vacuum. And if you, who is it that said, if you don't believe in God, you'll believe in anything?
Yeah.
So it's, you can take God out, but it's always going to be, God will be replaced by some other godlike thing in your life and in society's life. That this the antithesis of God, essentially. Yeah, and it's interesting for me because at this stage of my life, I'm looking at running for Congress again. I am officially running for Congress again, and
Good.
I've visited D.C. I was there for the inauguration. I had to go for the inauguration because it was just felt so amazing and
Oh, good.
historical. And I met with some folks while I was there, and they're encouraging me to run again. So I am running, and I was there a couple weeks ago. Um, but as I walked through, I was in the Capitol building, and I sat in with a congressman on their committee meeting, and I sort of shadowed a congressman around and did all that sort of stuff. But it's getting me thinking about, yeah, the lawmakers in Congress, which everybody hates, right? Everybody hates Congress, but they like their congressperson, right? But they basically hate Congress as a group. And I do too. I understand it. But I'm willing to join Congress. But I want to be a congressman who believes that there is good and evil and that the laws should respect supporting good and punishing evil. I mean, I what caucus is that I need to join?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's the Republicans, but it's more the Republicans and the Democrats. I'll tell you that. It seems like they're only choosing the wrong side of these 80-20 issues.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely running as a Republican. I'm a lifelong conservative, as you know. But like, there are these smaller caucuses that you're like, well, who do you like? And I'm like, well, I like Jim Jordan, and I like this. This caucus seemed pretty good, and then they kind of did crazy stuff. Like once the rubber meets the road and you're actually legislating, it's like that seems like where all the problems happen.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a huge fan of Mary Miller and her family caucus that she started, and that's
Okay.
It's a mini caucus, but it's growing, and they're the heart of all of the pro-family laws that are getting passed in the House. We've been working with her to protect kids from gender ideology, but also porn online. A lot of people don't realize that, you can get age verification. We just have to pass a law. There's up to, I think we're at 23 states now that have passed age verification, so we're making great progress. But the Family Caucus is definitely something worth checking out.
Okay, well that sounds up my like something I'd be interested in. That's good. So you actually American Principles Project, you're based in DC, right? Or
Yeah,
so
we're based in DC, but we play all over the country.
play? Okay.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
when I was there a year ago, and I met with you, I think you guys were out here in Las Vegas, and that was really fun to have lunch with you guys. But I went to I met with a bunch of people in DC, like the Heritage Foundation and Club for Growth and blah 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 blah. There's lots of different, conservative. Are you a political action committee officially, or okay? So
Yeah, so
it
we've
just
got
seems like there's a lot of those on the conservative side, which is great. But like, I'm just going to give you the one thing that I felt after I left DC is like everybody seemed too comfortable. They had their niche, they had their people, they had their places to go for lunch, they had their buildings, and I thought, wow, somebody really needs to come in here and just like stir everything up, which is
oh yeah.
not the conservative way, right? So to see Trump and his people come in and just take a machete to everything, I'm like, yes, go, go, go.
I'm totally with you, Marty. That's exactly right. Especially, look, there is this like real power establishment in DC, and people call it the deep state. No, it's just yeah, it's kind of the deep state actually.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
these are people that are at the highest levels of the CIA, highest levels of the IRS, highest levels of our media, our banking system, and they've all got people here, and they have gotten very comfortable. But I'll tell you, like the 2 days in DC where I've never seen people more depressed
yeah,
were, basically like November 7th, 2016 and November 6th, 2024. People in this town were very depressed, and it's because they know that they lost and their power structure is about to change. And when Trump first came back in and everyone was talking about all the cuts he was going to do with Doge,
yeah.
I've got family and neighbors here that, have government jobs, and they were worried, but I explained to them, I feel bad, like I think you're going to be fine, but the rest of the country's been going through these downsizings. They've been having their jobs shipped overseas. They've been having their factories shipped overseas. They've been having their kids lose their jobs,
Yeah.
right? Like my parents, I grew up in the Quad Cities. My parents saw all these new factories get raised up and started and built. And my family, my childhood was seeing those companies get shipped overseas.
Yeah.
So I don't know, part of me feels bad for the people that are involved in it. The other part is like, you're just delayed. The rest of the country's been going through this like
Been going
every
through this
other
for a while,
year
right?
and suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing, I think I probably even said this to you a year ago. As a lifelong conservative, I believe that, slow incremental change in the right direction that's careful, and we check to see that we're not causing unintended consequences. And I realized that if that's the conservative, William F. Buckley, Milton Friedman, all my heroes way of approaching governance, what to a certain extent that's allowed is even when conservatives get a certain amount of power, they're so careful with it that the cancer of progressivism just continues to grow regardless of who's in the White House. And I see, my lifetime, 70 years worth of this growing cancer since the time William F. Buckley wrote God and Man at Yale. The governmental deep state bureaucratic state that has this progressive cultural Marxist underpinnings has grown and grown and grown. And I don't think we can undo it without some well, this is what's funny to me. It's not conservatives who are undoing it. It's Donald J. Trump, who was a former Democrat, and RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and Elon Musk. These are not conservative people. These are kind of like they do things a much different way, and I'm kind of happy they're doing it. I'm glad that the conservatives are sort of, hey, can we be let in on this too? Because like we're knocking on the door to be let in because we're not leading the way. That's, I guess, what my main point is. I want to see conservatives actually be more revolutionary. And
Yeah.
is that possible?
Well, I tend to look. I get it. I know we're William F. Buckley, and I know their arguments. But if you look at the major Republican changes, what are the two biggest Republican accomplishments in America are ending slavery and probably the Reagan tax cuts.
Yeah,
Right? There's not we don't have as many of them as the Democrats do,
that's
but
right.
they also got a lot of bad things in their history. I think that if we're successful, we're going to follow the model of Reagan, of Lincoln, and even to a certain extent of Washington, in that you have these enormous reforms that come in and undo all the slow growing. That I think the small reforms work if you have control of the establishment.
Right.
But the reality is that we really haven't had control of the establishment since at least Bill Clinton. I mean,
Yeah.
Bill Clinton was a very popular president, but he did a lot of things under the radar that a lot of people don't know about, namely installing key people into positions of power, and then that allowed them to subvert George W. Bush. George W.
Yep.
Bush tried to go along with like the small neocon, reformicon type reforms, and he really, what was his lasting legacy? The
Yeah.
Iraq War, the
Yeah. I
war on
know.
terror. I have to get undressed at the airport every time now. I mean, I just think that if we're going to be successful, we kind of have to blow stuff up and have a much bigger type of change than what the Democrats get. The Democrats, because they're betting that their people are going to be in power in 30 years and they'll get another bite at the apple. I think we need to go bigger than what conservatives have done in the past.
Well, that's what I think too. I've talked about, my one philosophy of what the federal government should be. The goal should be taking the ring of power and throwing it into the fires of Mount Doom. Washington, D.C. has too much power. It needs, as a federalist, I think it needs to go out to the states and let the states experiment. But I think these kind of changes now, as I look, things need to get blown up. Things need to be cut violently, and there will be unintended consequences. That's a for sure thing. But like, I feel like it's better for people who have compassion and logic and reason to sort of mend damages that are unintended rather than just continue to accept the status quo and be so careful that we don't affect change and we let the progressive cancer just grow and grow and grow. So I've changed my philosophy to I won't say I'm a bomb thrower, but I think a revolutionary approach, certainly a healthy reform approach needs to happen. So
No, I agree with that, and I think that I think it's obvious. Like we have to strike while the iron's hot. We won't have Congress, or we aren't guaranteed to have Congress for the rest of President Trump's term, and we don't know who the
I'm
next
hoping to
president
do
is.
something about that in the midterms. Doggone it, at least in my district.
Which district is that? Is that Nevada 3 or
Yes, Nevada 3.
Okay, very good, very good.
Yeah.
That's on our radar for sure. That's
Okay,
definitely.
well, we'll talk more.
That sounds great. But no, look, the reality is I think we need explosive reform. I think it needs to be serious. It needs to be bold. There are a lot of changes in this big, beautiful bill that I love. It defunds sex changes all across the board, but it mostly expands the child tax credit. There are these Trump accounts where every baby born will be endowed with $1,000 that will be able to grow over time. I think we need to start looking at the big reforms that I would be seeking, Marty, are to get away from this obsession of growing government or growing corporations.
Right.
I think we need to focus a lot more on family formation over government formation or even capital formation.
I agree.
Because if you're just forming capital without families to back it up, that's not going to work out well. But families are why you need capital. I think the economy exists for individuals and for families. I don't think individuals and families exist for the economy, so to speak. I think I think the economy has to be beneficial, just like government has to be beneficial to the people. Otherwise, it gets abolished, like our founding fathers said.
Exactly. I was going to say that's going back to the founding principles of our country, and um, that's what I'm hoping that we can do. The Project 2025 got such a bad rap, and I know Heritage and you guys and a whole bunch of people came together, and it was perhaps from a marketing standpoint, maybe it shouldn't have been however many thousand pages it was. Maybe it should have been marketed a little bit differently. I know the Trump folks kind of pretend like we don't even know what that is. Um, I looked at what I looked at, and I'm like, man, I don't find anything I disagree with, which
Pretty
I took
good.
some heat for. But like, uh, I really do believe we need that kind of logical, back to the founders' vision of the country reform, and it is based on family, and it's based on supporting families that are who have a moral core, and we don't have a moral core without God. And our Judeo-Christian tradition is so part of our who we are as a country. We have to get back to those things, and we can't be afraid of saying it out loud and then being canceled or being voted out because we're too religious or something. I think that the tide has got to change, because otherwise we're in real trouble.
Yeah.
And it's the people that are in trouble. I'm going to represent the people, and this is what the people, they want it and they need it. We need that support as people.
No, that's exactly right. Either we're going to make change of this with the political system, or our generations that come after us will do it through an actual revolution. I mean, we've got to save this now. Politics is so important because it's a modern invention to avoid war. But so when you break down politics, you got to be very careful, because that's what I think these LA riots are about, is breaking down the political system, breaking down law and order. And it's very concerning. It's very scary, because once that breaks down, it's really tough to get the genie back in the bottle.
Well, and the thing that, this is the other thing that's happening currently with, besides Simone Biles, there's also the LA riots. And it's astounding to me, because we all know that we've been letting people invade our country that we're not invited in. So we have an invading force. Now there's a invading force in Los Angeles who are fighting violently and waving other countries' flags. Like, if that's not, if I don't know if that, how is that not war? Like, that's a declaration of war, in my opinion. It's an
No,
invading
it's
country with waving somebody else's flag, and you're burning cop cars, and you're stopping, traffic, and you're looting stores. I mean,
well, how about Karen Bass, mayor of LA, or Gavin Newsom, governor of California, both
impeach,
coming out and
impeach.
saying, well, they're both coming out and saying that if this will stop, these protests and these riots will stop. We'll stop burning down our city if you stop your ICE raids, if you stop enforcing federal immigration law. So what they're basically saying is that California has to they're either going to keep burning down their state and keep creating havoc and unrest, or the federal government needs to stop enforcing immigration law, allowing California to determine all of our immigration law for the entire country. It's just not how it works. They're literally doing the same moves that it would take towards a civil war. This is exactly what we saw during that time.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that, and I think we're at an inflection point. I'm glad to see what the Trump administration is doing, from the National Guard to the Marines. It's like this should have happened 4 years ago, 5 years ago, during the quote unquote summer of love. When I think about the Democrats' ability to not just misinterpret, but like take words and make them mean the exact opposite. Summer of love was a summer of violent hate. And, for them to say these are peaceful protests, when you don't have to be told by somebody when you're watching it live on TV, these are violent protests. So you can't pretend that the word peace is the same as violence and love is the same as hate. Like, it's so obvious. It's astounding to me.
No, these are the people that we have that largely control our media and communications infrastructure, and a lot of these government positions. They don't have our best interests at heart, right? That's just the reality. Is they want the chaos. They want to get Trump out. They have Trump derangement syndrome, and they're willing to have all of us suffer and have our livelihoods ruined if it means getting him out of office. It's not. It's a wonderful time to be alive. God is good, and we're gonna win.
Yeah. Well, okay. So last thing, I've kept you for a while here, but last thing I want to ask you about is just the so the near future is the midterms. I really believe that we desperately need 4 years of the Trump administration to really succeed and do everything Trump can do in 4 years. Losing Congress will just cause the last 2 years to be chaotic. But I'm also looking, 8, 16 years down the road too. Like, we have to keep the momentum going. I'm not going to be around for 16 years. Well, at least certainly not in politics. I don't think I got that kind of time, but I want to at least throw my lot in to help bring some reinforcements in for the last 2 years of Trump's administration. And I'm hoping we can keep Congress. What's your game plan as the American Principles Project to make sure that Trump is able to have 4 years of success?
Well, I'm really glad you asked. So we're launching what we call our Always On campaign. And this Always On campaign is starting this year. We're going to go up. We're going to start putting pressure on these elected Democrats in these key battleground congressional districts, but also some key Senate races. But we want to go on offense now. A lot of these political action committees that are out there, they wait to go up until September or August of the election year. We can't wait that long. Democrats have the legacy lamestream media. They're able to go on the attack all year long, 24/7, calling us the worst names in the book. We've got to start contacting voters now so that every time, for example, a member of Congress like Jared Golden in Maine 2 votes against protecting women's sports, well, we're going to do some phone calls in their district to make sure that every one of their voters knows about it. Or when they vote against protecting kids from gender ideology or take away parental rights, we're going to make sure that their constituents know just how radical and extreme they are. And this entree is going to be around $11 million going into November, and we're hoping to raise even more outside of that.
Okay. Well, that's really encouraging. Because I sort of jumped in, as you know, last year I jumped in really late. I was so late to the primary, and the primary was split between 4 people, and we lost to Susie Lee. And I thought, well, if I ever do this again, of course, at the time I thought I'll never do this again, but things changed. And now I'm doing it again. But I'm like, well, I'm going to do it different this time. I'm going to get in early. I'm going to start working early. I'm going to start raising money early, and I'm going to start attacking Susie Lee now, today, because she's the problem. It's not other Republicans. It's Susie Lee that's the problem in my district. And so it's interesting. I will be in, instead of like a matter of weeks, I'll be in for 18, almost 2 years of campaigning. And as I'm making some calls to get people to support me, and some people will, when I talk to them, will be like, well, this is pretty early, isn't it? And I'm like, no, it's not early in my mind. Like, I think we can't be too early this time, because it's do or die, I think, at this point. So I'm with you.
That's
100%.
exactly right. It's do or die. We can't mess around. We got to stop. Do you like having your life? Do you like where Democrats are wanting to take the country? I don't. I'm deathly afraid of that.
Yeah.
This is our job, right? Like, you can either have a democracy where you participate in it by funding candidates like yourself and running for office, or you let bad guys and tyrants take over, and then they end up taking it all away. I love the people that support us, but they've got to understand the urgency here. And I get it. Like, they have busy lives. They're not paying attention. But people need to start writing you. So we actually started a multi-candidate pack so that we could write guys like you checks early on in the campaign, because early money is like yeast. We got to get you in with our team to sit down with us and to get the betting going. But listen, we have to start funding these campaigns earlier. The Democrats don't mess around with this. The Democrats, when they run for Congress, they have all of their funding and donors lined up. It's so much easier because their donors are dead set. They're locked in. That's all they care about, is taking over in politics. Our donors need to understand that the other side plays for keeps, and they have to play just as much for keeps.
Yeah, and what I learned was that Susie Lee and the Democrats spend like $6 million just in my district for her to keep her seat. And I'm going to make sure that is not the case. I mean, she might spend that, but we're not going to let that be the reason why she wins. But that means we got to raise some money, and I'm willing to put in because this is where my grandsons were born, and I can't let the Democrats continue to control this thing. And I really believe that Trump deserves 4 years of
Yes.
success, not 2. Well, gosh, Terry, this is great. We should have had lunch and then I have you on the show, but it's sort of like we had our little lunch meeting right here.
That's
Please
right.
keep me in touch with everybody else who's in the group, and let's see what happens. I am in to fight this thing. My video game slogan comes from Halo 3, which is finish the fight. When I saw Trump stand up and go fight, 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 I'm like, yeah, and we're going to finish the fight. So,
Yep.
Okay, this is great. Thanks so much for coming on the show, and we'll keep talking.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me, Marty.
All right, see ya.
See ya.